Hello.
Long enough to cover the subject and short enough to keep it interesting. Welcome to a Monday edition of Outta My League. I'm Nick Diaz. That's Jamil Johnson. We are great to have you here on the show. And we are brought to you by Billy Ehrman's Flowers and Gift Shops. Fellas, Valentine's Day is Tuesday, February 14th, a week from tomorrow. Every guy knows he has to do something for his lady, all right? Don't procrastinate and end up in the doghouse, all right? Call Billy Herman's right now, all right? It's only going to take a few minutes to place an order, and then you're done with it. So do it. Call 272-ROSE or click 272rose.com to place your order. Or better yet, just go and visit one of their 3 locations in person and select from a wide variety of flowers, plants, gifts, a whole lot more. They're located on Perkins Road in the Garden District, Perkins Road between Segan and Piku, and North Harrells Ferry Road, right off Old Hammond in between Airline and Sherwood. And guys, I'm going to give you the hookup right now. When you call, click, or visit in person in one of their 3 locations, if you mention Out of My League with Nick Diaz, you get a free box of chocolates. Free box of chocolates. All you got to do is mention my name, my show, Out of My League with Nick Diaz, free box of chocolates. You want to help me out? Let me help you out. Go to Billy's Herman's, all right? You don't want to end up in the doghouse. Be a hero and let Billy take care of it. Billy Herman's will send you your love through flowers for Valentine's Day. So call or click 272-ROSE. That's 272-ROSE or click 272rose.com. We got a great show planned for y'all today. Leah Vann, in about 15 minutes from The Advocate, is going to talk a little bit of LSU baseball. She was out there in Alec Box Stadium this weekend, giving everyone a little bit of a scouting report. She'll join us in about 15 minutes to preview that and what she's seeing. LSU football got some recruiting news over the weekend. We'll get to that in a bit. Some of you may not be happy. Some of you may not be. The other thing we'll talk about today, and I didn't expect to talk about this, but I got so many requests and there were so many things in the news about it. The Sue Gunter Dale Brown court situation. I've heard about this, but enough's enough. I have to say my piece because everyone wants to know what I have to say. So we'll talk about that later in the show as well. And Saban has found his new coordinators for Alabama. It's a yearly thing, but this one may be just a little bit different. It's a little bit more unusual. We'll talk about that next here on this show. Be sure to hit the like button, share button, comment button, subscribe if you haven't already. Check us out on Spotify if you haven't done so as well. But we start today with this. LSU football just lost a top recruit in the state of Louisiana to Deion Sanders in Colorado. Juwan Johnson, the number 18 athlete in the country, is from Lafayette Christian Academy. He's the number 4 player in the state and then a top 200 player overall in the class. Now, he plays quarterback at LCA. He was projected as a defensive back going in, and, well, we know Deion. He knows how to recruit defensive backs. He committed this Saturday, flipping from what considered to be a heavy LSU lean to a surprise commit to the Colorado Buffaloes. So I said on Thursday that I don't know if this is a surprise. I had heard Colorado was making a push for Juwan Johnson, and that was one of his final 3 schools. And also the fact that Juwan Johnson hadn't been back to a visit in LSU in kind of a while. And I also said that if he does, in fact, commit to Colorado and Deion pulls one out of a rabbit out of his hat again, which shouldn't shock any of us at this point, I also said that I wouldn't least bit concerned about it, about a recruit's commitment 10 months away from the December signing day. And I'll tell you why you should be concerned and why you shouldn't be concerned. Why you shouldn't be concerned is, one, well, because it's 10 months away from signing day. Anything can happen in 10 months, especially nowadays in the age of NIL and the transfer portal, who knows. The second reason why you shouldn't be too concerned is that the idea of moving away from home, and I said this last week, the idea of moving away from home is not always what it seems, especially for a lot of kids going away to college that far away. Every time you see a Louisiana player commit to a school that's that significantly far away from the Southeast, it's unusual. Now, Tackett Curtis and Jaden Ausberry this past recruiting cycle, they're exceptions to the rule. They're not the rule itself. For the most part, when a Louisiana player leaves home, especially South Louisiana, it's very hard for them to adapt to a new culture because the culture in South Louisiana is just so unique to the rest of the country. That's not us or me tooting our own horn. It's just kind of the facts. When they do leave, it's usually for Texas, right close by. That's usually for Mississippi, 1 state over. Alabama, same thing, 2 states over. A lot of kids, and really this isn't just South Louisiana, this is really any player from just about anywhere. They can say they want to get away from home, but once they actually get away from home, or once that signing date gets a little bit closer, all of a sudden it starts to hit them a little bit. It's like, oh, wow, it's actually kind of a long ways away from mom and dad. Not every kid says that they want that, but not every kid can really put through. And I think in some ways that's kind of what happened to that cornerback from California who ended up committing to Oregon. It was committed to LSU the entire time, but then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's kind of a far ways from home. It's just a tough thing. You never really know how a kid's going to react. The third thing is that Juwan Johnson committing to Colorado is not NIL related for any of you asking. It's not. It's also not winning related either. That's for damn sure. And this is not necessarily for playing time either. This is just a guy who wants to be around Deion Sanders. Now, that's a powerful pull across the country, as we've seen. But I'll tell you something else. Colorado has the top 2 cornerbacks from the back-to-back classes on their team, Travis Hunter and Cormani McClain. So as far as him like, oh, I'm not going to play at LSU, I'm going somewhere where I know I can play, that's not necessarily the case. It's just simply because of Deion Sanders' pull as a recruiter. But the last thing, if you are worried about this, if you are worried about LSU getting any defensive backs this year for the 2024 cycle, I'll remind you, LSU just signed 2 cornerbacks out of their transfer portal, Denver Harris and Zy Alexander. They're both sophomores. They're not going away anytime soon, along with the cornerbacks that they also signed, chief among them being Javen Toviano. Now, if you're worried about the 2024 class, what about that? Is there any cornerbacks depth that we're going to be missing for the 2024 class? No, because currently LSU's top commit is a defensive back, a safety from Texas, and they have 2 cornerbacks committed already. One is from New Orleans, the other is from Georgia. But Juwan Johnson, who is currently the number 4 player in the state, listed as an athlete, the number 3 player in the state, would you like to know who that is? A cornerback. Wardell Mack from New Orleans currently has a 99% prediction for LSU to land him. Y'all, Juwan Johnson's not even the highest rated defensive back. He's not even rated as a defensive back. Technically, he's rated as an athlete, and he plays quarterback for his high school team. Didn't even play defensive back. That's just what he's projected as the next level. Now, I'm not going to be one of these people that, oh, he ain't that good. No. From everything I hear, he's actually really good, and he still can be very good, especially if he goes to a place with Deion Sanders in Colorado who knows how to coach DBs. But LSU still has plenty of options. So that's why you shouldn't be worried about this. Now, here's why you should be a little bit worried. This was Deion Sanders on Twitter Friday afternoon. This was before Juwan Johnson committed on Saturday. Deion Sanders tweeted out, quote, "Are there any Louisiana dogs out there that feel underappreciated, stepped over, overlooked, or neglected? I want you because I know what you have inside. I ain't too hard to find, but I'm looking for you right now." We've heard this in recruiting circles, y'all, especially when it comes to Louisiana athletes. People want Louisiana athletes because of the personality that they have, the culture that they have. It's indescribable. Deion Sanders is just another line of coaches that has circled Louisiana as a top spot for him and his program. And to top it all off, he also just hired LSU's Associate Director of Player Personnel, Corey Phillips, away, promoted him. Now he's helping run things right now with recruiting at Deion up in Colorado. And that's probably how they got an in with Juwan Johnson. But I'll say something else right now. This is not Deion tooting the horn of Louisiana prospects just for that one recruit or recruits going forward using social media and all that stuff. And this is also not me tooting the horn of Louisiana in general because I'm from here. All coaches in the country want Louisiana players for that exact reason. The personality of the players are different. They're a different breed. That's where you hear the term Louisianimals come from. That's where you hear the term savages. Every time LSU gets a recruit from Louisiana or a Louisiana kid makes a big play in the NFL or makes a big play in college football, you'll see guys like Tyrann Mathieu do #savages. We're different down here. It's a thing. It's a real thing on the recruiting trail for a lot of coaches across the country. And Deion has circled those players. Well, Nick, I mean, everyone wants those types of players. What's the big deal? LSU's gotten them before. You're right. But Deion got the number one player in the country to go to Jackson State. And then he got him to follow him to a 1-11 Colorado. NIL deals were after Travis Hunter in that situation both times. And he still chose Deion in both those situations. He also just flipped Miami's top recruit, the number one cornerback in the country from Florida, to go to Colorado after only one visit. One visit. You realize how much money Miami and Florida offered to Cormani McClain? Do you realize how much money Georgia and all these other teams offered Travis Hunter twice to leave Deion Sanders? Y'all, Deion Sanders as a recruiter is something we've never seen before. Because Nick Saban never got big-time recruits at Toledo and Michigan State. Now, he's a great recruiter and all that, but same thing with Coach O. Coach O was always been a great recruiter, but he didn't get, great recruits necessarily when he was at McNeese or Syracuse, right? Certainly didn't get the top-end guys at Ole Miss all the time. We've never seen this before. A celebrity coach who can actually do the work and recruit and coach. And Deion has decided that Louisiana is his new hunting ground. And he just hired an LSU staffer to do it. This won't be the last time Deion and Colorado get into a battle with Brian Kelly and LSU moving forward. Whether it's at Colorado or whether Deion moves on to another school, this won't be the last time. This won't. So there's your good news, bad news take for today when it comes to LSU football recruiting. It's always something to be concerned about. But I will say this. I've seen LSU fans in general take this with a huge grain of salt. And maybe some of you are right in the fact that, well, look, this is just a high school player fangirling over meeting Deion Sanders, and this will wear off. Yeah, maybe. Maybe you're right. But as I said, Travis Hunter, Cormani McClain, they committed. They went all the way. Travis Hunter did it twice. So we'll see how that goes. All right. We'll take a quick break before we bring on Leah Vann from The Advocate. Be sure to hit that like button, share button, comment button, subscribe if you haven't already. Leah Vann of The Advocate is next. We will talk LSU baseball. She will give us a little bit of a scouting report on the number one team in the nation from the baseball scrimmages. She's been out there every day grinding, doing the dirty work for us. She's going to give us the scoop next here on Outta My League. Don't go anywhere.
Hey, Baton Rouge, when traveling through Natchez, Mississippi, whether you need to fill up your vehicle or your belly, stop by Go Mart and On The Go Deli. GoMart has clean restrooms, community coffee, an awesome beer cave, and a great selection of anything you might need on your trip. So stop by GoMart at 4 Sergeant Prentice Drive as you're entering Natchez on the left, and visit Tom and Wright Granning and their awesome team at GoMart.
We're all from different places and backgrounds. We've each experienced our own versions of life, but in the end, we're all on the same team. I'm part of that team, along with these players in purple and gold.
Kayshawn Buddha, Malik Neighbors, Miles Frazier,
Kyron Lacey,
Greg Brooks.
Whether on the field or in the courtroom, your team matters.
So join our team.
make a difference.
Bet. Let's get it done.
It is time to trade in your isolation for celebration, to break out and get away. And at Baton Rouge Metro Airport, you'll get away a lot quicker. BTR is way closer, more convenient, with easy parking, check-in that's a breeze, and non-stops and short hops to anywhere you want to go. So get back to your life and be quick about it. Baton Rouge Metro Airport. It's about time. FlyBTR.com.
Hey, Baton Rouge.
All right, welcome back to Out of My League. Be sure to hit that like button, share button, comment button. Boy, we tried really, really hard last week. Had a lot of technical difficulties to get Leah Vann from The Advocate on, but she was so gracious and patient with her time that she decided to give us another chance and come on our show and talk a little bit of LSU baseball, previewing this exciting season that's coming up with the Tigers and Jay Johnson in year 2. Leah, thank you so much. Oh, by the way, you can follow Leah on Twitter at @LVan_sports. Leah, can you hear us this time?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Oh, it's perfect. Absolutely. Absolutely beautiful. Okay. A huge sigh of relief. Okay. So let's get straight to it. Thank you so much for coming on. We'll get to kind of general thoughts before we get into some specifics when it comes to this LSU team. But over the weekend, watching these 3 scrimmages specifically, what was your kind of biggest takeaway from the weekend?
It's hard to say. I think that a lot of guys are still trying different positions, a few different combinations. Gavin Dugas was back, which I thought was huge. He had a big home run one of those days, and so I think that was huge. He played a little bit of third base and a little bit of second, so that was interesting. He made a really nice diving catch at second, so I thought his presence added to the field. The pitching was really good, especially on Sunday. Chase Shores and Christian Little both were really impressive, and Garrett Edwards might be a guy out of the bullpen that we need to keep an eye on. In addition to Bryce Collins, I think those are some guys that were already on the team that we've kind of forgotten in all the midst of the excitement of all the transfers.
Okay, so let's stick with the pitching rotation since we're on that subject. Outside of the starters like Skeens and Thatcher Hurd and stuff like that, we have a lot of guys on the team that are going to step up, as you said. But what I wanted to discuss was something that Wes Johnson, LSU's new pitching coach, said, that they're going to do things differently, where they're not so much going to have a set rotation. They may have more of a matchup system. Can you explain what he means by that?
First off, I think pitching coaches are the most secretive people. Both him and Jason Kelly were just very hesitant because they want to give every guy the opportunity to compete. So I think there's a caveat of take what he said with a grain of salt. But I do also believe that the rotation is not going to be set in stone in the beginning of the year and it's going to stay the same. I think obviously you have Paul Skeens on a Friday, but on Saturday, are you going to go with a Thatcher Hurd, or are you going to go with a Christian Little or Chase Shores? Or do you want to start a lefty, right? Maybe there's a hitter that's giving you some trouble that struggles with a certain pitch. And so that's when you start to think about some of these matchup situations that he's probably alluded to. I know that starting a left-hander would be probably advantageous at some point in the weekend rotation, just because that's something that LSU didn't have last year. But so far, I've seen guys like Nate Ackenhausen and DJ Primey, we saw a little bit this weekend, and a couple other guys have really just been mostly out of the bullpen. So, Yeah, I think there's something to that. I think it's also going to be based on performance in real time, right? I mean, like Blake Money started as the Friday night starter last year, and then it ended up being Mikhail Hilliard for the rest of the year. So, I think he's just kind of saying take that, with a grain of salt.
What's the health status of Thatcher Hurd right now?
Thatcher is great. So he went through, he said, 14 weeks of physical therapy. And then he went through a 10-week throwing program to get him back on track. And so he's been good to go since the fall. He had this unique stress fracture situation in his back that's actually genetic. So he just kind of had to figure out how to manage it and let it heal, most importantly. And he certainly had the time to do that. And so he said he feels great. I talked to his parents. They said he feels better than ever, and he looks pretty good out there. So, he's healthy.
So you wrote in an article last week for The Advocate breaking down second base, and Jay Johnson has described that position as probably the biggest position that's up for grabs at the moment. So I know, look, we're not even in, we're less than 2 weeks away from the start of the season, but just from what you've seen so far, who could you say is taking that position for grabs right now at second base?
I think it depends on matchups because you've got Ben Nipple is a left-handed hitter and Jack Merrifield is right-handed. So it's kind of like, it's going to depend on how they want the lineup to look because, Jay, hitting is a huge priority. But as far as, defensively speaking, I've seen a lot of really good things out of Jack Merrifield. And he's aggressive. He has probably a little bit of a stronger throwing arm and a lot of position at second base. I think I wrote in that article that at the junior college level when LSU Eunice went to the championship, he was their starting second baseman and played an entire season there. And he's the only guy on the team who has played an entire season. Now, it was in junior college, but an entire season at second base. Ben has actually played more third base and played a little bit of second base also last year. But Ben did have, he might be a more consistent batter. I haven't seen that lately. I feel like they're both kind of toe-to-toe in that competition. And then you've got Gavin Dugas, who, if you want somebody with experience at that position, he's probably your guy. And he showed this weekend that, he's coming back with a vengeance despite this eye injury. So right now, honestly, I do think Jack Merrifield actually might be the sleeper, the guy that we all need to keep an eye on because I think he's been the most consistent from what I've seen. He's also that guy that everybody just kind of admires. He's the first guy who runs out onto the field every single day, every single rep. He's played a little bit at shortstop, which shows that he's athletic. But I think Ben is also advantageous in the sense that he adds a different bat to the lineup.
So let's go over to the offense. People have asked, there's so much we can say about every single hitter and all that stuff, what LSU has coming in, what they have coming back. But people have asked me probably a lot about DH because there's just so many options that you can put at DH. And they've asked a lot about Paul Skeens, and rightfully so. What's the likelihood that he becomes sort of a set DH on days where he's not starting as a pitcher?
So Jay did tell us that he's being prioritized as a pitcher because obviously that's what you need to get to the College World Series, right, is elite pitching. I think, he did say that he was going to bat on Sunday, and I left in the 7th inning yesterday, so I didn't see him bat at all, but he may have. He did bat the weekend before that, just for he had 2 at-bats against Griffin Herring. So, it could be a situation where he's pitching on a Friday night and then he hits on a Sunday. And then Saturday, you've kind of got Kate Beloso, Braden Jobert, and maybe Jared Jones or Ethan Fry as kind of your options to DH. I don't know. Tuesday nights, I wouldn't bank on seeing Paul Skeens DHing for Tuesday night games unless they're playing Texas. But yeah, I think that's how it's going to be handled because he did. Jay did say, we want to keep attracting top pitchers to this program, and if we're not careful enough with his health, then people are going to look at us and be like, I don't know if this is a safe place for two-way players to come, or if this is a safe place for elite pitching to come. So they're being very careful about it.
So last question for you. Everyone knows about the transfers, the stars that are coming in, Tommy Tanks and Skeens and Thatcher Hurd and all those guys. But who has been probably, I don't want to say the biggest standout, but maybe the biggest surprise out of the newcomers that you've seen, not just from this weekend, but through all the scrimmages you have seen? Who's been the biggest kind of surprise coming out of nowhere?
I wouldn't say he came out of nowhere, but I don't know if you just want me to talk about the transfers or if you want to include the freshmen. Freshmen too. Okay. I think Paxton Kling. Paxton Kling is incredibly fast, and he's got a good bat, and he's really aggressive in the outfield. I think he could kind of be that guy who's next in line for center field when Dylan Cruz leaves. And I know nobody wants to think about that, but that's a reality. And yeah, I mean, Jay even said that he's part of kind of the strongest defensive outfield that he has right now. It's Kling, Cruz, and I think he said it was Stevenson. So, I think he's been the biggest surprise. And he comes from central Pennsylvania, where there's not a lot of top guys coming out of his area. He even told me, he's there's no one. So he's been really a unique guy to watch. And I just think his speed, as far as adding an element of athleticism that LSU didn't have last year to steal bases and play a little bit more aggressively on offense, will be huge, even if he's just pinch running for somebody and not even playing, at all in a game.
She's Leah Vann of The Advocate. Follow her on Twitter at @lvan_sports. Leah, thank you so much for being patient with us and giving us a second chance coming on. We appreciate you as always, and we're certainly excited for this baseball season.
Well, thank y'all so much. Have a good one.
You too. Thanks again. Appreciate Leah. Boy, last week was rough, but we got through it, and she was good enough to come on, and real good stuff there. As far as the things that I'm looking forward to with LSU baseball, it's the pitching. For one reason and one reason only. I mean, obviously the fact that pitching is what wins you championships, but LSU games are going to be a hell of a lot shorter. I mean, that was just brutal last year, was having to sit through those games for almost 4 hours on a consistent basis, over 3.5 hours. And even the diehard baseball purists were getting tested, mostly because baseball purists who are diehard, who've been around the game the longest, were pre-analytics, and analytics has a lot to do with blaming the games for being this long. But also, analytics or not, LSU just had no choice but to have those kind of games if they wanted to win, and win consistently like they did last year to get to the postseason because of the pitching situation. They didn't have any starting pitching. They just had a bunch of rotational guys, and that's just, what they had to do. Relief pitcher the hell out of teams to try to get wins. But I'll tell you another reason why LSU baseball games might be shorter this year. And it's not just because of the pitching being better and being more loaded. It's because the offense is going to score so many runs, more so than they did last year. So the SEC announced earlier today that they are implementing a 10-run mercy rule in conference play. 10-run mercy rule in conference play. Not just tournament play, but regular season play. So if a team like LSU is up 10 or more runs through 7 innings, game's over. Game's over. Now, I will tell you this. I'm sure a lot of people have feelings about this. I understand tournament. A lot of people will agree with it because, look, you got to get the tournament done in a certain amount of days, all that stuff. I get that. But when it comes to regular season games, as someone like myself that was not raised by baseball fans, my parents were not huge baseball fans, actually not baseball fans at all, and I myself didn't play baseball past coach's pitch, I think probably is what it was. I fell in love with LSU baseball in 2008 season. The 23-game win streak, the miracle comebacks that season, the postseason, all of that. That's what that team was known for. And even myself, who didn't grow up with the baseball purity, or didn't see, raised by baseball or played baseball or all that stuff, I still understand that many of you diehards and purists will be upset by this rule. I get it. I understand. Because a part of what makes the game so great, or at least it's what everyone says, is that it doesn't matter what you're down by, it's not over until the last out. And we've seen that happen certainly a lot with LSU and Paul Mainieri, specifically that season in 2008 that I talked about. And I understand, and as I said, I won't fan shame you. If you're not happy with this stuff, with the way the game of baseball is going, I won't fan shame you. I will, however, fan explain you. The game of baseball is trying in all levels to shorten games. They just have to. Now, I don't think the game being longer is the problem. I think pacing is the bigger problem in baseball, but that's neither here nor there. The point remains is that there are just too many games that go 3+ hour longs every single night. But in regular season games, that's not so much an issue. Now it's being made an issue. And I understand that's what makes the game great, is that it's not over until the last out. It's not over till it's over. I get it. But if you are constantly getting beaten by 10 runs in the 7th, guess what? You're not a good team. There's only so many chances you deserve. But, if I have to hear come tournament time, selection Sunday, or whatever the hell it is, where this one team got left out, and they're like, well, with 2 more quality wins, this team could have gotten in, and there was that several games where they were down 10 runs, and they got called with the 10-run rule. That's going to happen come selection Sunday, and guess what? I don't care. I don't care. Because not everyone is Ole Miss from last season. That was a very unusual outlier. And if your argument is that, well, they were only 2 games away from being down 10 runs in the bottom of the 6th, and if that 7th inning 10-run rule wasn't in place, they may have gotten it. If that's your argument, it's not a great argument. If that's your argument, it's not a great argument. Don't get blown out in 2 games with a 10-run rule going into the 7th inning. Matter of fact, Peter Burns brought up another thing on Twitter. He's of the SEC network, and I wholeheartedly agree with him on this one as well. I'd be 100% fine with a runner starting in scoring position in extra innings of SEC play as well, not just for tournaments. And Peter Burns says if they do it in the MLB, and if it's good enough for the MLB, it should be good enough for the SEC baseball. MLB has done this. And look, from everyone that I hear who are MLB diehards, it pissed them off. They pissed and moaned about it. Look, I get it. Now, this isn't the playoffs or the tournament or Omaha. This would just be for the regular season. Now, the argument of, well, if it's good enough for Major League Baseball, it should be good enough for SEC, that's more of appeal to authority. The argument should be good because the argument is good regardless of who does it or doesn't does it. That shouldn't be the reason. The reason should be more of the 10-run rule, for example, or specifically with having a runner starting in scoring position on second base in extra innings, is that Major League Baseball plays 162 games still. God, that's a lot. Their jobs as players are to recover, sleep, and, get ready for the next game after a long, late night game and travel time. They travel a lot in baseball. And they get paid generational type wealth to do so. SEC players, well, they make NIL money. It's not generational wealth at all. And they also have to go to class. They have to go make up tests that they missed. They have to study. They have to have certain hours where they're not allowed to be with the coaches, to be in the facility, all that stuff. It actually makes more sense to have these types of rules, these 10-run rules, these rules where runners in scoring position in extra innings. It makes more sense for college baseball than it does Major League Baseball, because that's their job to put up with this. That's their full-time job, and they get paid generational wealth to do so. And not to mention, I'm just a bigger fan of shorter baseball games. More about pacing, but just shorter, not necessarily a horrible thing. Especially the crap we had to endure with LSU baseball last year. That was rough. Even for the diehards, that was rough. Okay, we'll take a quick break. Be sure to hit that like button, share button, comment button, subscribe if you haven't already. And check us out on Spotify. When we come back, everyone keeps on asking me about this Dale Brown, Sue Gunter court fiasco. Look, my whole goal on the show is to talk about things that you're interested in. And since I've gotten so many questions, I'll talk about it. I'll give you my opinion about this whole situation. We'll talk about that next here on Outta My League. Don't go anywhere.
When traveling through Natchez, Mississippi, whether you need to fill up your vehicle or your belly, stop by Go-Mart and On The Go Deli. Go-Mart has clean restrooms, community coffee, an awesome beer cave, and a great selection of anything you might need on your trip. So stop by Go-Mart at 4 Sergeant Prentice Drive as you're entering Natchez on the left, and visit Tom and Wright Granning and their awesome team at Go-Mart.
We're all from different places and backgrounds. We've each experienced our own versions of life, but in the end, we're all on the same team. I'm part of that team, along with these players in purple and gold.
Sean Buddha, Malik Neighbors, Miles Frazier,
Kyron Lacey.
Greg Brooks.
Whether on the field or in the courtroom, your team matters.
So join our team.
Make a difference.
Bet. Let's get it done.
It is time to trade in your isolation for celebration, to break out and get away. And at Baton Rouge Metro Airport, you'll get away a lot quicker. BTR is way closer, more convenient, with easy parking, check-in that's a breeze, and non-stops and short hops to anywhere you want to go. So get back to your life and be quick about it. Baton Rouge Metro Airport. It's about time. FlyBTR.com.
Hey, Baton Rouge, when traveling through Natchez,
All right, welcome back to Out of My League. Hit the like button, share button, comment button. Okay. I was going to get to this first, but since I was looking up on Twitter, Sean Payton had his opening press conference with the Denver Broncos and was asked a lot about, how he's going to handle, let me see if I can find how he's going to handle the relationship with Russell Wilson. And he was not asked specifically about Russell Wilson, but he was asked about going forward if players are allowed to have their own private coaches and trainers and stuff like that into the facility, into their own office. For those of you who don't know, Russell Wilson is a fake, and he's really annoying, and he's just extremely off-putting personality. And to make matters worse is that he has his own team of coaches and trainers that follow him around like a posse or a groupie or whatever the hell you want to call it. Not groupie. That's something else. Oh, boy. That's something else. That basically just kind of do things for him. And Sean Payton was asked today about if there will have any personal coaches in the building like there were last season. And Sean Payton's response was, I'm not familiar with that, but that idea is, quote, foreign to me. That's not going to take place here. I just find it so interesting that Sean Payton would go to the Denver Broncos, considering what could have been available next year and what could have been available going forward. And I don't know. He must really have enjoyed that meeting with the Denver Broncos. And he said from day one that really the ownership in the organization is what's most important. Not so much who the quarterback is. Now, Russell Wilson, you can still I still believe that Russell Wilson you can win a Super Bowl with. I don't know if you can anymore because of how he played last year, but also you saw how he played as soon as his head coach left. And also there's reports of Russell Wilson being hurt and stuff like that. But that to me is going to be probably the biggest challenge for Sean Payton. It's not the organization. It's well run, not the ownership. That seems to be good. The tradition, the roster's great. They have a great roster, especially on defense. It's going to be, can he get Russell Wilson to just be normal, to not be a diva, to not be weird, to not be full of himself, to act all fake and Hollywood-like, and I don't know. But look, if there's any guy that can do that, it's a guy like Sean Payton. And look, when it comes to Russell Wilson, he got on the phone and begged and pleaded for Sean Payton to come back to come back to the NFL and to coach him. So maybe it will work out, but I just don't see them winning a Super Bowl in Denver with Sean Payton and Russell Wilson specifically because of what they have in that division, who they have to face. And I just think Russell Wilson's getting up there in age, but we'll see. Okay, let's move over to LSU basketball. Not specifically with what happened on the court this weekend. We'll get to that later in the show. But I've gotten a ton of questions about this Sue Gunter court naming thing. To be quite honest, I don't really care all that much at all. I've heard about this. I've heard whispers about it. I haven't paid attention to it much at all. But seeing as so many of you have been asking me, I'll give my take on it real quick before we move on to another topic. I don't know all about the political stuff going on and why exactly it's going on. Political stuff behind the scenes with the governor and all this other crap. I'm sure someone else can explain that to you a hell of a lot better, like Jordy Culotta. He could probably explain that to you on his show. Go type in a message on the Jordy Culotta show, 7 to 9 a.m. every morning. I'm sure he's explained it more than I possibly could, or better than I possibly could. But I want to talk about the sports aspect of it, because that's just kind of who I am. I don't really get into anything else other than just sports. What I'm about to say is probably going to be different and unpopular compared to what most people's opinions are of this Sue Gunter, Dale Brown court thing. And that's this. Neither Dale Brown or Sue Gunter deserves to have the court named after them at all, whatsoever. I said that from day one. When I think of stadiums, when I think of arenas, when I think of fields or courts that are named after people, coaches or players, they usually, or have to be, at least a first major person or the first influential person with that team or franchise. Wrigley Field, Alec Box Stadium, Fenway Park. You know, they were sort of the first influential person for not any specific reason or maybe multitude of reasons, and they name it after them, and then it just becomes a tradition, and so you keep it. I mean, Alec Box wasn't that great of a player from my understanding. I think he was just a good player, but, you know, you named it for what he did off the field. He was a war hero. Wrigley Field, I don't know who the hell Wrigley was, but they named it after him, and it is what it is. It's tradition. So that's the first part. The second reason why you would name something after somebody, a field, a court, an arena, a stadium, is you're a sponsor of some kind. Look, at the end of the day, money makes the world go round. The third reason is that you are synonymous. And this is the most important part, is that you are synonymous with that team and that school. You're one and the same. Bryant-Denny Stadium, Bear Bryant is Alabama athletics. Not just Alabama football, he is that university. When you think the University of Alabama, you probably think several things, and one of them, top three, top two at least, is Paul Bear Bryant. Pete Maravich Assembly Center. Everyone knows about Pistol Pete. You don't have to explain that to nobody or nothing. Rupp Arena, up in Kentucky. I mean, you not know Adolph Rupp? I mean, and plus he deserved it. Maybe the greatest coach ever. Coach K Court up at Duke. Pat Summitt Court up in Tennessee. They're so historically great. Players and coaches that are so historically great, there's probably never going to be another one like them. They're generational type of influence as far as their performance as coaches or as players. Dale Brown and Sue Gunter are neither of those whatsoever. Now, when you go across LSU, and you probably ask current students, who is Dale Brown or Sue Gunter? I guarantee you, see, we live in a sports bubble, so probably you diehard sports fans that went to LSU or currently go to LSU that are listening, you would probably say, well, of course I know. But I guarantee you the general LSU student body would say something like, oh, I've heard the name Dale Brown before, or that seems familiar, or who's Sue Gunter again? That's what they would say. Guarantee you. Unless they're diehards, then they probably don't know. But if you walk around campus and you ask any student body member, any of them, from member of the band, member of the fine arts department, the science department, math, business administration, manship, you ask them who Pete Maravich is? Well, of course. You ask who's Shaq? You know who Shaq is? They can probably tell you. Ever heard of Chris Jackson? Maybe less so. Simone Augustus? Oh, guarantee you that. They could give you stories. They could probably even give you stats. You go across college athletics around this country in general. Any general sports fan, hell, just any sports fan, whether it's in college or not, and you say the name LSU basketball, you know what they say? They probably say, oh, Pistol Pete Maravich, 44 points per game, all-time leading scorer, LSU history, all-time leading scorer in NCAA history. Crazy stats. They probably most likely will say Shaquille O'Neal. Oh, Shaq, LSU basketball. Kids today still know who Pistol Pete is. That's why they named the arena after him. Hell, diehard NBA fans coast to coast will probably also bring up Bob Pettit and Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, formerly Chris Jackson. Y'all, I'm 28 years old, and me and my teammates in the late 2000s, 2009, 2008 to 2010, we were looking up Pete Maravich highlights and famous Pete Maravich practice drills on YouTube. The video cassettes that everyone had in the 80s and 90s. We were looking those up in the 2000s to early 2010s as well. Hasn't gone away. And let me say this. Dale Brown led LSU to 2 Final Fours, and the day he retired, he had the second most SEC wins in men's basketball behind Adolph Rupp when he retired. I get it. That's great. His accomplishments are not worthy to name a court after. And Sue Gunter isn't for damn sure either. Now, some of you are going to say, well, Nick, you're too young to remember. You just don't know the history. Oh, bullshit. I love LSU history. And of course, I don't remember, but I consider myself a historian about this kind of stuff. One, it's because it's my job, and two, just because I'm really interested and I love history, and I especially love LSU history. But when you say you're too young to remember, or you weren't alive to remember that stuff, you're right. And guess what? I consider that a privilege not to remember, because I'm not being lied to by nostalgia. See, there was a controversial opinion at the time when Rudy Macklin's jersey got retired in the rafters. There were a lot of people, and quite honestly, I kind of remember agreeing with them to some extent, is Rudy Macklin doesn't deserve his jersey retired at LSU. Not his number, his jersey specifically. Because how is Rudy Macklin next to Bob Pettit, Pete Maravich, and at the time, Shaquille O'Neal, and that was it. One is not like the other. But if you ask people my parents' age who were in junior high, high school when Rudy Macklin was playing, well, at the time, LSU Football had just fired or gotten rid of or retired, however term you want to use, Charlie Mack with football. Skip Bertman in baseball, hadn't showed up yet. So football was down. Baseball was still irrelevant at that time. So basketball, that was, the thing to make you feel good. And Rudy Macklin, to my parents' generation especially, Rudy Macklin was God to them. But when you put the accomplishments next to historically what Bob Pettit meant for basketball, what Pete Maravich, especially Shaq, meant for basketball, they're not the same. Now, I'm not necessarily saying you don't have to retire his jersey. I think he deserves to have his jersey retired considering what he accomplished at LSU. But I understood the argument because people of a certain generation were being lied to by nostalgia about, was he really the greatest thing since sliced bread? No, he wasn't the greatest thing since sliced bread. He was a very good college basketball player, but not to the level as those other people. It wasn't nostalgia lying to them. And I'll tell you something else. When it comes to Dale Brown and all this stuff about naming stuff after him and all this other stuff, look, nobody ever bothered to name shit after Paul Dietzel for football. And he's way more accomplished in a shorter amount of time of what he did for LSU football than what Dale Brown did for LSU basketball. And I also get that Dale Brown did so much for the community here in Baton Rouge and Louisiana. Okay? I hear that all the time. Well, it's more than just about basketball. I get that. That's awesome. He did awesome things for the community. And I'm glad that Dale Brown did that for my hometown, my state, my alma mater. And I'm so glad he was LSU's basketball coach. Very, very happy for that. That has nothing to do with his basketball accomplishments on the court. That's what this is about. If every humanitarian got something accomplished when it comes to, playing a sport and also being man of the year, woman of the year when it comes to off-the-field philanthropy, there'd be a hell of a lot more people's jerseys retired up in the rafters. I have higher standards for naming things after somebody. I have higher standards, quite honestly, for statues. I'm starting to think we have a little bit too many of them here at LSU. Building a statue, retiring a number, I have higher standards. I can appreciate Dale Brown was with LSU's coach, and I can appreciate what Sue Gunter did for the women's program, and more importantly, recruiting Simone Augustus. who definitely deserves to have her name up in the rafters and have a jersey retired and a statue and all that stuff. But give Sue Gunter a banner. She still has one, by the way. Dale Brown, same thing. I was never a fan of naming a damn thing after Dale or Sue. Not because of politics, which I still don't really understand what's going on with that, but because what they did while they were great, not great enough for my standards. That's just me. Take it or leave it. But whatever. LSU's going to do whatever they're going to do, and there are bigger issues in the world than somebody saying, well, it should be named this, not that. Is what it is. Okay, I went kind of long there. We'll take another quick break. When we come back, we'll end the show on this. Saban has his new coordinators set in place at Alabama. And it's different than probably what he's done in the past every time he's had to replace a coordinator. Saban's going backwards. I don't necessarily mean that as a bad thing. I'll explain what I mean next. And also, LSU women's basketball, they're set up for an undefeated matchup at South Carolina on Super Bowl Sunday. We'll end with those thoughts next here on Outta My League. Don't go anywhere.
Natchez, Mississippi. Whether you need to fill up your vehicle or your belly, stop by Go-Mart and On The Go Deli. Go-Mart has clean restrooms, community coffee, an awesome beer cave, and a great selection of anything you might need on your trip. So stop by Go-Mart at 4 Sergeant Prentice Drive as you're entering Natchez on the left, and visit Tom and Wright Granning and their awesome team at Go-Mart.
We're all from different places and backgrounds. We've each experienced our own versions of life, but in the end, we're all on the same team. I'm part of that team, along with these players in purple and gold.
Sean Buddha, Malik Neighbors, Miles Frazier,
Kyron Lacey,
Greg Brooks.
Whether on the field or in the courtroom, your team matters.
So join our team.
make a difference.
Bet. Let's get it done.
It is time to trade in your isolation for celebration, to break out and get away. And at Baton Rouge Metro Airport, you'll get away a lot quicker. BTR is way closer, more convenient, with easy parking, check-in that's a breeze, and non-stops and short hops to anywhere you want to go. So get back to your life and be quick about it. Baton Rouge Metro Airport. It's about time. FlyBTR.com.
Welcome back to Out of My League. Hit that like button, share button, comment button. Have the show up on Spotify as soon as we can. Get it up after the end of the show. Check us out there. LSU women's basketball is now 23-0. They beat a bad Texas A&M team yesterday. And many thought that while it was very possible that LSU was going to be undefeated going into that South Carolina game against the defending national champions, it was going to be a 1-2 matchup. Well, number 2 Stanford lost this weekend as well, and South Carolina is still also undefeated. Many would think LSU would move up to number 2. They did not. They stayed at number 3, and Indiana Hoosiers women's team jumped them at number 2. And many people are pissed. Okay. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I know a hell of a whole lot about Indiana women's basketball and their strength of schedule and all that other stuff. I could probably look up the, what the NET ranking is, all that, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's the polls. The polls made this decision. But more importantly, the polls are irrelevant when it comes to college basketball. I understand it feels cool, but this goes back to what I said earlier in this episode, earlier in this show. Old habits die hard. Earlier in this show, when I talked about nostalgia lying to you, what does it really matter other than just one little point one other way in a vote? What does it matter? Okay, the polls are irrelevant when it comes to college basketball because it all comes down to seeding in the tournaments. Why we've obsessed over that with college basketball just as much as we have with football, where the polls used to very much matter, never really understood it. Now, many of you would say, well, why wouldn't they want a 1 versus 2 matchup on television? They're hurting themselves because pollsters don't work for ESPN. I'm assuming, of course, it's definitely ESPN because it's an SEC game. Pollsters don't work for ESPN. I'm sure maybe some ESPN writers who cover college basketball probably voted 1 versus 2, but they're independent writers. They have nothing to do with television rankings, and nor do they care because that's not their job. Their job is to write and vote. And honestly, I can't necessarily say I blame them for keeping LSU at number 3 because LSU almost lost to a mediocre Georgia team where they went to overtime against. Almost should have lost, really. And then they had to fight till the very end and, kind of let a bad Texas A&M team, probably the worst team in the SEC, till the fourth quarter. I think A&M was within 5 or 4 points going into the fourth quarter. So LSU kind of, if you want to call it, with that Tennessee game, the whiteout and all that stuff, had a bit of a hangover with the women's team. Bit of a hangover. Considering this is a young program under Kim Mulkey and they're still learning their ways, I can't say I'm too shocked by that. But as far as looking forward to the South Carolina game, I'm not going to give a prediction on this just yet. So this is not my official prediction. Don't go freaking out just yet. I don't think LSU is going to beat South Carolina on Super Bowl Sunday, less than a week from now. I just don't. LSU has some serious issues with handling the press. That was something that Kim Mulkey talked about at various points in her interviews with Jordy Culotta in the mornings last week. And that's what Georgia continued to expose. Really did. I mean, LSU's lack of depth at the guard position outside of Alexis Morris, and really Flau'jae Johnson, who's more of a wing small forward, that's an issue. There really is. Alexis Morris can't be the only one out there constantly trying to break those presses because those teams have the scouting report out on LSU, and you saw that especially against Tennessee, but also against Georgia specifically. A little bit of a hangover, but also just South Carolina. They're bigger, stronger, faster in every single position. And when they press LSU, I think that's going to expose LSU a little bit at that position. South Carolina is just on another level right now. So I'm leaning towards South Carolina. But again, it's women's college basketball, 1 versus 3. LSU can very much win the game. Okay, let's end the show with this. Nick Saban has finally hired his new coordinators. A little bit of annoying that we seem to be this concerned about who Alabama hires as OC because at the end of the day, they're going to run what Saban wants them to run, and they're going to run what Saban's playbook says. That's really what Saban brings in at this point is you're going to run my system and what I have, especially on defense. Saban has hired his defensive coordinator, former LSU defensive coordinator actually for 1 year, and former Auburn DC, Kevin Steele. Previously worked with Nick Saban in previous years. I think he was his linebackers coach at one point before he got the job at LSU. And then Tommy Rees last week came from Notre Dame, former Brian Kelly assistant, and to be his OC. Okay. As far as what this means for Nick Saban in Alabama, it's clear what Saban tried to do with these hires. It's to go backwards. And what I mean by that is this. Saban has been known for the previous 2 decades, and probably before then, of smash mouth football. Run the ball, play defense. Run the ball, play defense. Being the most physical team, having the most physical practices known to mankind. Well, in recent years, Saban kind of lost that for one reason or another. Now, most teams in general have been losing that just because of the way that football has been moving towards RPOs, spread offenses, getting rid of fullbacks and fewer tight ends, all that stuff. Well, Saban, and rightfully so, pivoted philosophies around 2015 or 16, going away from the smash mouth scheme to more of that spread RPO offense with a bunch of quarterbacks and receivers, 5 wide sets, no more fullbacks, all that stuff. And guess what? It worked for Nick Saban in Alabama, as it worked for most people. They had a ton of success. They lit up the scoreboard and they had a bunch of, wide receivers and first-round picks and Heisman Trophy caliber quarterbacks. And they won 2 national titles doing so. especially in 2017 where they were much more finesse as opposed to 2020 where they were much more physical. But on the flip side of that, and this is what happened with everybody, is that Bama's defense got worse every single year. When you practice smash mouth football, when you don't practice smash mouth football as much in practice, your defense loses some of its physicality. You play how you practice. And that's really what kind of hurt Bama in years that they didn't win the national title, whether they made it to the college football playoff or they didn't. They've been lacking on the line of scrimmage specifically, especially on the offensive line. These hires, from my understanding, are Saban trying to fix that problem. Now, it's not so much about scheme and playbook because, look, Saban's going to tell his OC and DC what to run. But take Tommy Rees, for example, who was hired last week from Notre Dame. He's known for running smash mouth power football at Notre Dame. One, because they kind of had to because they don't have great skill players on the outside at Notre Dame. And two, because Brian Kelly also loves his heavy tight end sets. He's bringing that to LSU as well. That's what Tommy Rees is known for. And Tommy Rees also runs a very kind of pro-style kind of offense more than most do. And although he didn't have as much success at Notre Dame as probably a lot of Notre Dame fans thought he would his first year without Brian Kelly, I don't expect him to fail at Alabama. I expect him to simply do what Nick Saban wants him to do and get back to what Nick Saban used to do. Saban's system, Saban's style of running the ball, throwing off a play action. And in order for Saban to continue to go forward in some ways, he had to go backwards. Because, y'all, look at what college football has been doing the last 2 years. And this was a theory that was proposed several years ago before this kind of happened. Who has made the college football playoff the last 2 years? There have been two teams, and two teams only. Georgia, two-time defending national champions, and Michigan. What do they both have in common? They're both run-heavy teams. They're both teams that aren't afraid to get under center. They're both teams that like to have 2, 3, hell, sometimes even 4 tight end sets. They're very, very balanced. Run the ball, play defense. Now, they're doing it in a modern way. They're mostly still out of shotgun and all that stuff, but they're playing more smash-mouth heavy football. And the theory was years ago is that, eventually with all these teams getting smaller on defense, being softer in practices, all that stuff, when they face a team that runs power I or runs counter or has, 3 or 4 tight end sets, they're not going to be able to stop them because they just don't see it or practice it hardly ever. Saban said that in the Tennessee game, is that Tennessee on the goal line had I formation fullback dive where Tennessee scored on the goal line, and Nick Saban after the game said, look, my players looked at that and they're like, we don't know what the hell we're doing or how to defend it. I think this is Saban trying to get back to what he was doing before, which is where college football is kind of leaning towards now going forward, is going back to that smash mouth tight end heavy sets. Not that they're going to get rid of spread offenses or tempo or certainly not RPOs, but as defenses have been getting smaller, offenses have adapted. Same way that offenses adapted when defenses were big and fast and strong and clunky, offenses got faster and speedier. So this is all cyclical. And Saban, he's getting ahead with the system, just like Georgia and Michigan have. And honestly, I think we can say the same thing about LSU with Brian Kelly and the way he's bringing in his tight end sets. So you see football changing and going back and forth, and Nick Saban's usually the one on the forefront, and I think these two hires, specifically with Tommy Rees, show that going forward. So we'll see. All right. That's all we got for you today. Be sure to hit that like button, share button, comment button, subscribe. Have the show up on Spotify later this afternoon. Appreciate Jamil for helping me out as always. Appreciate Leah Vann for coming on. And I appreciate you, the fans, more importantly. Wouldn't be here without y'all. Subscribe, hit that like button, share button, comment button, all that good stuff. I will see y'all tomorrow at 3 p.m., same time as always. Y'all take care.